everyone. This is Terri A. Wilson, and I'm here with another pop-up interview. If you have seen any of my pop-up interviews before, thank you for coming back and checking out this one. If you haven't seen any of them before and you're kind of curious about them, a pop-up interview is basically, it's a random time that I sit down and I talk with people who, well, my favorite kind of people who love books, authors, bloggers, service providers, readers, just anybody who loves to talk about books. And it's a pop-up interview because the times are random, whenever it works for me and my guest, and nothing is scripted. Everything just comes up as it comes up, and we just roll with it however it goes. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please go ahead and hit the bell right down below, because then you'll get an email every single time I upload a video. You'll be able to watch it. And trust me, go ahead and give this a thumbs up, because you're gonna like it. Just do it. Trust me, just do it. I'm happy tonight to have my guest, Chiquita Johnson. Hi, Chiquita, how are you?
Hi.
Good. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm glad we were able to sit down and have this chat.
Sounds good. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you write?
Hi, my name is Chiquita, but I write under the pen name Celeste-Marie Lyon.
Okay.
I write romance, specifically erotic romance for now. That may change, and I am having a lot of fun doing it. The best part so far has been meeting so many different authors who write in so many different genres. I'm learning something new every single day.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I just figured out what HEA means. I had no clue what that meant. And I'm like, wait, that means happily ever after? That makes so much sense. But getting online and encouraging myself to keep writing, meeting new people, and just kind of seeing how their lives are worked around their writing, and realize, you know what, everybody's going through the same thing you're going through. They have kids, they have a job, but they love it, so they find a way to make it happen.
Right.
And it's been a lot of hard work. I have messed up quite a bit, but I have learned something every time. Like I've made huge mistakes and went, oh, okay, well, what can you take from this? And right now I am in the middle of writing my third book in my series. It is tentatively supposed to be released the end of summer 2019. Who knows? Who knows?
I love how you say tentatively supposed to be.
In my mind, when I knew I would write a third one and I started in January, I tend to produce rather quickly, but I've had so many life changes in the past few months that it has slowed down my writing considerably. Well, in comparison, my first novella, I actually wrote that in 3 weeks. I had a week-long break from work at the beginning of July, which is rare. And I was like, oh, you should do something big. You have an entire week off. Kids are out of school. You don't have to in the morning. And somebody's like, you keep saying you're going to write a story. Why don't you start the story? And I'm like, why not? I'm just sitting at home. Why not? And I started it. And by the end of July, I was done. And I was like, you know what? Try to publish it yourself. I looked at what people were going through, doing queries, and I'm like, that's not for me. So I said, you know what? Tons of people are self-publishing. Let me start. And it was a learning curve, but I did it. And I was like, holy crap, I wrote a book and I self-published it in a month. And I'm like, yeah, it's a novella. It's like 42 pages, but I'm like, but you did it. Like, right. You actually did it. You set a goal and you put in the time and the effort and you did it. And I was just kind of really proud of myself. I was like, this was huge. This was huge.
Well, and you talked about the learning new stuff, how you're learning new stuff. You've mentioned that several times. And I personally find that one of the great things about this job is it's never the same thing. I wake up in the morning and I might have the same process of what I do, but what I do changes all the time. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I was a stay-at-home mom for the first, let's say, like 12 years of my kids' life. I have 2 kids, so the oldest is 13. And I really started to feel like they were getting to that point where they didn't need me as much. They made their own breakfast, they made their own lunch. They do a lot of their own chores now that I didn't have to do. But because I had been living that life for so long, some of this intellectual stuff that was supposed to be in here like disappeared. And this has been this incredible challenge. And it's not just, it's very mentally stimulating.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Definitely.
And I feel like I'm exercising those muscles in my brain that, and I'm not trying to say that motherhood, you don't exercise your brain. I get all of that. And don't take me seriously. Anybody out there? I don't. But it's a different set of muscles.
Mm-hmm.
And every time, you finish a story and you're just like, but it's in a great,
Exactly.
And every time you learn something new, it's like, oh, I did this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a lot what you're talking about.
Absolutely. It's my kids are actually 12 and 13. And I was just wondering, like, how are you going to do this? And I said, you know what? If you would just take away the time you spend on social media, you could easily put a book out easily. That's actually slowed me up too, is I delved into the writing community on Twitter. Oh my God. But I keep learning things. So I keep scrolling and I keep reading. And then I find an interesting thread and I find another interesting thread and I keep reading because I keep learning. So it only wants to make me pursue it. And then I stop and go, wow, that was 2 hours. You could have wrote for 2 hours and I still learned something, but then I look at it and go, okay, this is a new challenge. This is something you're going to have to balance. Mm-hmm. Because like I said, meeting new authors and learning what they go through and how their process is has definitely helped me become more streamlined and to think through outlining and where I want my characters to go. So I see it as a big plus, but I should not be spending 2 straight hours on Twitter. I absolutely shouldn't. And I look at that and go, it's the balance. Just like I balanced work and kids and writing my first 2 books, I need to balance the interactions that I'm having online also. Yes, they are a great benefit, but if I stay on Twitter and can't get my book done, then what was the point of me being on Twitter to learn? Right. It's very much, like I said, it's a constant kind of juggling everything. And it's been a big release for me to get that story out of me. That story is always rolling in my head. I find myself sometimes thinking like my characters. There are pieces of me in all of my characters, good and bad. And I think that's why when I start to speak about them, if you don't understand I'm speaking about the characters in a book, you really do think I'm talking about someone I actually know, because I've done the background work. Like I understand where they're coming from mentally, what their childhoods may have been like, what they struggle with on a daily basis, because that's what I write about. I love romance and I love the love story, but I don't do fluff characters. Even though I call it fluffy smut, but I don't do fluff characters because I feel like that's cheating the reader to make it all very surface.
Because our readers are very much 3-dimensional. And they want 3-dimensional characters that they can connect to. I mean, there have been a lot of times that I'll read a book, and I've even had some reviews on some of my books where people will say, I didn't like this character at all. I thought this character didn't work. I hated this character. And I have to step back and go, okay, they didn't connect to that character. But that doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad character. It was just they weren't able to connect to that character. And so then I have to go back and go, okay, well, was it the writing or was it just them? Or was it just, and then you have to kind of balance all. And that goes back to, just learning stuff. But I absolutely think you're right as far as characters. I've always been more of a character person as a reader. And I try to do that as a writer. I think sometimes I might fail only because I forget that the reader can't get into my head and see what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think sometimes I might miss a few things, but yeah, no, I absolutely think you're right.
Yeah, like even as I formed my characters, spent absolutely way too much time finding names for them, and writing up backgrounds. I actually put time and effort into thinking, what are their flaws?
Mm-hmm.
Because I can't write a human being and not write flaws. The main female character, yes, she's beautiful. It's a romance. Everybody looks good, but but she has a lot of inner personal struggles, and I dive into where that comes from because I want her to have a happily ever after. But as a character, you need to do the work on yourself in order to get there. That has to be part of that arc. I couldn't have you meet this great guy. You guys instantly fall in love, and then you get married, and everything's sunshine and happiness. Like, no, that makes no sense. And in mapping her life and what she was, where did she go to school, what does she do for a living, I said, you know what? She has family issues. I have her come from a two-parent home, midwestern, middle class, suburban Chicago, and I go, but what's her hang up? And I made her hang up her mom. She is an overachiever. She is a straight A student. And she is so much an overachiever, she has literally made herself sick the majority of her adult life. And as you delve into her character, you understand that a lot of that came from the pressures that were coming from her mom and dad. She became that overachiever because she felt like she constantly needed their approval. At
Mm-hmm.
this point, this character is in her early 30s and she's still doing it at a point where, as an adult, you have learned enough that you're pursuing your own happiness. She's not. In the back of her mind, her mom's voice is always in her head, criticizing her and
Mm-hmm.
criticizing her choices. And therefore, she does too. And I was happy with that because I know so many women who are like that.
Mm-hmm.
Their family's approval is so important to them. I've seen them jeopardize their romantic relationships because this isn't the person they would want me to be with.
And so, from what I'm hearing you talk about, is your stories for you aren't just stories, but almost vehicles to help your readers, help them deal with issues. And so you said you've seen a lot of women who have had these issues, and I know men who have these issues too, where they are constantly looking for approval, not necessarily well from other people, but still they're that little boy that's still waiting for their parents to say good job.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so it seems like you've created stories that are very therapeutic.
And that's intentional. I decided that I wanted to tackle one big issue, and I picked mental health. It is a very current topic. It is a hot button issue in some societies, in some communities, different ethnic backgrounds. It is taboo, and it's still taboo. Um, and she has to wrestle with that. It is hindering her life. It is hindering her. And there's a point where she has to stop and she has to acknowledge it.
Yep.
And when she does, this man that loves her is supportive. He's like, if this is what you want to do, and I believe it is the best thing for you, I will help you find someone. Because that's part of love. Like, nobody comes to you complete and perfect. They all come with their own baggage. And loving them doesn't mean you fix them, it means you help them fix themselves. Because no amount of love is going to make you better. You have to
Absolutely.
figure that out. And there
Absolutely.
was a part of me that said, is that a little too deep? Like,
Mhm.
is that going too deep? And I said, but that's being authentic to the character that I wanted to write.
Mhm.
Being beautiful and being successful is only going to bring you so much. In my world of people and the different types of people from different socioeconomic backgrounds and different education levels, I have been around wildly successful people. And the one thing I noticed is the ones that lived well and were seemed genuinely happy. They all had therapy. They all had to work through something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have a friend, she is absolutely gorgeous. And I remember there was a time where we just kind of sat and talked, and she said, I just moved to the area, and she said, I need to find a therapist. And I'm like, you're in therapy? Because of course you see her, and I mean, she looks the way that she looks, and she seems so self-confident. You don't think those people do that. And she said, I have been in therapy in for like the past 10 years. And she said, more or less, depending on what's going on in my life. She said, I'm a child of divorce. She said, I am a very hard worker. At the time, she was working in investment banking. And she said, I do 70-hour weeks or more. She said, that takes a toll on you.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I may have 3 weeks worth of vacation. I may make six figures, but I'm also leaving the office, going home, showering, changing, and coming right back because the Asian markets open up in a half an hour. She said, it's what I had to do in order to be successful, but I also understood that it was going to take a toll on me physically and mentally. So that just kind of, and this has been 6-7 years ago, just kind of woke me up. I'm like, whoa, like no matter how much you think somebody has it all together, they got that way because they acknowledged they had issues and they did the work.
Yeah. There's an actor out there by the name of Dax Shepard. He was in Parenthood.
Mhm.
Okay. He has a podcast, and this isn't a plug or anything. I just like listening to his podcast. Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard. But he is very open about his drug addiction that he's worked through. And he talks a lot about AA and what he went through going through AA. And he was saying that he thinks everybody should go through AA, whether they have an addiction or not.
Mhm.
And I absolutely do think that therapy is probably something that all of us could use,
Mhm.
whether we do have major issues. I mean, because we all have hangups. We all have hangups, and then there's the major issues, the suicidal issues, manic depression, bipolar, and I think a lot of times we think that those people need counseling. Those people need work. I'm sitting here, I'm a product of a divorced family as well. I'm a product of an alcoholic father, and I think I've survived. I'm okay. But there have been times when therapy has helped me just because it was somebody, especially when I was with the babies, somebody who listened to me. She had to listen to me, you
Mhm.
know? And it was like, at that time, there really wasn't the people in my life that could just sit down and go, hey, Terri, how's it going? Let's spend the next hour talking about you. It just didn't happen. So I totally agree with you on that.
Oh, definitely. I did a lot of self-reflection after I got divorced, which has been actually, it's been 9 years this month. And it was about not so much why did this fail, it was about what do you want? Because it's not this, it wasn't this, and that's why you chose to walk away from it. So what do you want? And it took me years to just go, this is what I want, and be able to check off a list. And a lot of it was things that I wanted to accomplish before I decided to go meet anyone else. There were just things that I wanted to do for me, be purely selfish, because I knew if I could accomplish those things, um, it would help my self confidence and my self esteem, which makes me a better person to be around. It makes
Absolutely.
me a better parent. So yeah, I'm going to go in a little bit, and I'm just going to do that work for a while. Um, and part of that was I allowed myself. I actually gave myself permission to leave. I gave myself permission to drop my kids off with their dad and leave. Something that I hadn't done since 2008. So about, yeah, almost a decade. I had never gone anywhere by myself ever.
Wow.
And I was like, why? And I'm like, because you're a mom, because you're a mom. And every time that you want to do something that's very much about you, you talk yourself out of it. I
Absolutely.
haven't had a manicure or pedicure in 5 years. Every Mother's Day, I say, that's what I'm going to do for myself. And every Mother's Day, I end up sitting in my pajamas and watching Netflix, and eating ice cream, because I decided that that's all I really want to do for myself. And I don't want to go get my nails done, because, oh, well, that's a lot of money. And it's that.
Mm-hmm.
And fall of 2017, I had accomplished so much. I had paid off student loans that took me a decade, and living well below my means. I started my own business. I gave myself a creative outlet. I designed clothes, t-shirts, different things like that. Something that just could work that other side of my mind, and it
Mm-hmm.
made me happy. So it wasn't about whether or not I could sell it. It was about whether or not I could do it. And I decided, you know what, go somewhere you've never gone before. And I decided to go to Vegas, which anybody who knows me would be shocked by that, because I'm not a drinker and I absolutely don't gamble. So it's like, why would you go to Vegas? Like, what what are you going to do there? And I'm like, just walk around.
Yeah.
It's like, just to say I went there. And I did it. And I went and I saw a show, and I ate at some buffets, and I spent like $40 in a slot machine, and I was like, I'm done. And it was 3 days, but when I came back, just it was like I had a different energy.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody's like, well, of course, my kids were like, what did you do? And I said, mainly just kind of watched movies in my room and hung out and ate room service. I said, but I needed that.
Mm-hmm.
I needed that. I walked off of that plane just lighter.
Right.
Like I didn't feel that weight anymore. When I went there, I was just kind of covered up in a sweater and just kind of hunkered down and just like, oh, I just need to go somewhere. And I loved it. And I loved it so much that next spring I did it again. I got on a plane and I went somewhere I'd never gone before. And I spent 3 days just kind of walking around, meeting new people, and just doing something fun. And it was the catalyst for the stories that I eventually wrote down. And it was a huge accomplishment for me to take that step and be very selfish, because all parents, but especially moms, feel so guilty about doing something that doesn't involve their children.
Yes.
We all do. And I had to just acknowledge that. You haven't gone anywhere because you're going to feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
What if something happens? Or what if their dad is right there? He can handle it. He has their insurance cards. The hospital's 3 blocks away. It's really like you can do it. And now that I look at it, and it's 2 books later, 2 trips later, I'm in the middle of writing a third, and I go, that thing that you did that was wholly self-serving, look at what came from that. Look at what came out of you because you allowed yourself to do that.
Yep.
And when I talk to people about it, they were like, oh, like friends, families, coworkers, when they get the books and they read them and they laugh the parts that I meant for them to laugh at, and they have the same reactions. And I go, you know what? If all I ever do is sell a couple of dozen books, I was like, it's not about that. It's about writing that story.
Mm-hmm.
And I've changed my mind back and forth over the years, because some people were like, oh, you ever thought about doing like a manuscript or possibly selling the story? And I say, you know what? Anything's possible. My kids got to go to college. Like, I need money like everybody else. But the theme of it, the way that I structured my characters, what I have them go through, the conversations that they have, because it is very much back and forth conversation. I do a little bit of scene setting, but the majority of the story is driven by the conversations that people have.
Yeah.
And ultimately acknowledging, hey, I have feelings for this person. What am I going to do about it? I think I love this person, but what's holding me back? And it didn't seem like much when I first started writing the story, but as I got deeper into it and the conflicts that came of it, the support and the resistance to this couple's relationship, it really let me have very honest conversations in the book about the things that people deal with in everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
The characters, because I write my world how I live it, so my characters are very diverse. They come from multiple backgrounds, and the 2 characters are of different backgrounds. So I go into hers so that you can see what's causing problems in her life, and I go into his. And while his family seems to be very, I want to say Brady Bunch, and very much we're all loving and it's all so great, he still has some personal issues. And as they decide, whether are we going to stay together and be a couple, are we going to make this work, and they start mingling and interacting with each other's friends, with each other's families, I start telling a backstory. And my backstory actually goes all the way back to the 1800s. And the character that is the male lead, he is Sicilian. His character's family is based in New Orleans. I based them in New Orleans because when Sicilian immigration was very heavy in the 1860s and 70s, we all think of that as East Coast, Ellis Island, that kind of immigration. A huge amount of Sicilians came in through New Orleans. Mm-hmm. Huge amount. To the point that at one time, the French Quarter was actually known as Little Sicily.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's where the research comes in. Mm-hmm. I came up with an idea and I started researching it, and it just solidified it. I don't know what made me think to base his family in New Orleans. And then I went, wait, does that even make sense that his family would be from New Orleans? And I started researching it. I'm like, holy crap, I had no clue that many Sicilians came through New Orleans. And my coworker, who I knew I thought was Italian, she actually is Sicilian, and her family came to St. Louis from New Orleans. Wow. And we sat and we talked about what the stories that her grandparents told her about what that was like. And I asked her some questions of things that I saw online. And I said, as every immigration, every ethnicity that comes to this country, once you get off the boat, you all come in with that same pushback. And I said, I read online that when Sicilians came here, because there was literally a famine, there was literally a drought, and people were starving. So it was either stay in Sicily and not have anything to eat and not be able to survive because they came from a mainly agricultural background, or come to America. And that's why a lot of them left. And when they came to New Orleans, they came with those skills. They started farming. The farmers grew their produce and they gave it to their family members who built stores and sold it in their stores, because that's what communities do. But when they came here with people looking at them as if they were bringing the mafia in with them. And when you get into that mindset, and I'm like, it's 1860s, it's the 1870s. Since that's not my cultural connection, and I started to read more and more, and I was like, wow, can you imagine? Like, you literally starved, you were starving, and you came to this country, and then people look at you like you're going to bring organized crime into this country.
Well, it's still happening, Chiquita.
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely still happening.
And I love the story so much, I had to write about it because the parallel was just too obvious.
Right.
The parallel was way too obvious. And I said, yeah, I'm going to include it. I'm going to talk about it. And I'm glad I did. And I'm glad once I made that decision, I started meeting people and finding information that solidified that. Like, yes, his family can have that entire history, and it can all be based in New Orleans.
Now, what's the title of these books?
The series is called The Elusive Series.
The Elusive what?
The Elusive Series.
Okay.
And the first book is Need versus Want. That's the novella. I have a little one right here. And that is the initial introduction of the main characters. The female MC, she decides to go to Vegas, and she goes to a rock show. And at the end of the show, she bumps into this lead singer for one of the opening bands. And she's, of course, nice and polite because she is that kind of person. And she realizes, okay, this guy has an interest in me, but I don't do musicians. Like, I don't, no, I'm good. And he's so smitten with her, and he's not quite sure why. Like, okay, she's very pretty, like, she's very nice, but he just seems like, okay, I got to get to know her. And they make that connection in the first book, but she goes home and she was like, no, you're being silly. Like, you're in Vegas. Like, don't lose your mind. You have a life in Chicago. Go back to Chicago and just forget about it. But she couldn't. Like, she couldn't forget about him. And in the beginning of the second book, she actually flies to Los Angeles to see his band specifically play. And they reconnect at the end of that show. And they have a weekend where they just kind of get to know each other. And you see them start to fall for each other, but you see she is very resistant. And of course you think, well, yeah, like she's this really goody girl. Like, there's no way she's going to fall for this guy. And she's very much, you see her reluctance, and it's very much in her prejudices about what she think he must be like because this is his job.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're on the road all the time. You have groupies. You have probably a different girl in every city. And I can't. Like, you see me as interesting now because you're probably just trying to hook up with me. And very valid. I mean, the average person would be like, yeah, like, who's going to seriously date a lead singer? Like, we all see what happens in those relationships. And he keeps trying and he keeps trying to convince her, no, I'm interested in you for you. And there was just a point where she had to go, I'm going to take him seriously or I'm just going to walk away from this. And things happen, not doing spoilers, but things happen. And by the end of the second book, she was like, okay, this might actually work. But between the two of them, they have so many people who are supportive, so many people who see that they are good together, but she has family issues. She has pushback because her mom and dad are looking at this guy and going, oh no, honey, no. This is not the man that you should be with. This is not who we raised you to date. And because she is an only child and because she feels like, okay, I still should be doing what my parents are suggesting because they want what's best for me, is pulling because her heart is like, this guy is great. Like, this guy treats me really well. He makes me feel great. But yeah, what my mom said might be true. Like, he might just be wanting to kind of hang out with me for a little while, just trying to hook up with me. And I want something serious. And it's those voices in her head and what they do when she interacts with him. Because they're always there. They're always in her head going, this guy's not going to be serious. This guy's not going to commit to you. Mm-hmm. He's here for fun. And when he gets bored, he's going to leave.
Well, that sounds like an awesome series.
It's been fun. It's been good. Fun. And my main thing was to keep it realistic. I did a little bit of research. I know quite a few musicians. Some of them, great relationships. Some of them, disastrous. Right. And just in general, like, no matter where you come from, he could be a musician. He could be a plumber. He could be a taxi cab driver. Those things in our minds that go, because you are this person, this is what you're about before you interact with them, get to know them. It is a take on that too. And because we trace his family back, we do trace her family back. And you start to see that some of those things that we do now and those hangups we still have as a society, as we have as a country, those things have been there in all walks of life since we've been here.
Right.
But people still manage to come together. People still manage to love each other. People still manage to get married, have families for generations on end.
And I'm all about the love part. So we're going to wrap it up on that love note. I like that. Chiquita, I want to thank you so much for coming and visiting with me tonight.
Thank you. I had fun.
I also want to thank you guys. Thank you for giving up some time to come and watch this show. I know there are so many things in our lives nowadays that are demanding our attention, and I appreciate you taking the time to come in and spend some time with me and spend some time with my friends. If you haven't already, hit the little bell down below so that you can subscribe to this channel so that every time I post a video, you will get a notification. Since they kind of are random, you want to make sure you get that email so that you can come and watch it. Also, I will put down all of Chiquita's information. We'll make sure and list her pen name and all of that stuff in her books so that you can go stalk her, you can go love on her, you can go buy her books, you can go do what you need to do. Thank you, everybody, and have a great night.